The ATS begins by placing the patient's arm in a relaxed, slightly flexed position. The ATS then applies tape adherent as well as heel and lace pads to the medial and lateral portions of the elbow. The ATS will then apply pre-wrap beginning at the mid part of the upper arm and moving distally to the mid portion of the forearm. The ATS will then apply 2 anchor strips to the mid portion of the upper arm, as well as 2 anchor strips to the mid portion of the forearm. The ATS will then apply a strip of non-elastic tape beginning at the anterior part of the upper arm and moving laterally to the posterior part of the forearm. They will then apply another strip beginning at the posterior part of the upper arm and moving medially to the anterior part of the forearm. They will repeat this process, overlapping the tape by half of the width. The ATS will then apply a strip of tape on the lateral portion of the upper arm, moving distally to the lateral portion of the forearm. The ATS will then repeat on the medial portion of the arm, starting with a strip of tape on the posterior part of the upper arm, moving medially to the anterior part of the forearm, then applying a strip of tape on the anterior part of the upper arm, moving laterally to the posterior part of the forearm and repeating the process, overlapping by half of the width. The ATS will then apply a strip of tape on the medial upper arm, moving distally to the medial forearm. The ATS will then apply two closure strips to the medial upper arm, as well as 2 closure strips to the medial forearm. The ATS will then ensure that the tape job is neat and functional and document the job that has been done. The ATS will then verbally explain when the athlete should discontinue use.